Imagine a single rat on a ship accidentally rewriting half of Europe. What if a lost dog, a stubborn tortoise, or a dancing parrot quietly bent history's timeline? From war elephants in the Alps to pigeons that saved entire battalions, animals kept changing human plans. Sometimes they stopped epidemics. Sometimes they almost started wars. Sometimes they rescued movie studios. Sometimes they embarrassed emperors and generals. And most of the time, nobody realized what had really happened. So how many turning points were actually decided by fur and feathers? Today, we're diving into the wildest moments animals hijacked history. By the end, you'll never look at your pet the same. Flea-bitten black rats helped unleash the Black Death. A wave of dying Europeans began with flea-ridden rats. In the mid-14th century, ships carried black rats everywhere. Those rats were infested with fleas carrying Yersinia pestis bacteria. Ports like Messina, Genoa, and London saw sickness explode. People blamed bad air, planets, even minorities, not tiny insects. Without understanding germs, they piled corpses and fled walled towns. Trade routes kept moving, letting rats and fleas outrun quarantines. By the time anyone tried cordons, plague already crisscrossed Europe. All that started with ordinary rats hiding in ship cargo. Mosquitoes carrying malaria halted armies and shaped empires. Before bullets stopped generals, mosquitoes quietly stalled empires and armies. Malaria, carrying Anopheles mosquitoes, haunted swamps from West Africa. European explorers pushing inland kept collapsing with fevers and chills. British soldiers in West Africa called the region the White Man's Grave. Later, French crews digging the first Panama Canal died in swarms. Yellow fever and malaria killed so many workers that projects collapsed. Only when Ronald Ross and others proved mosquitoes spread parasites, strategies changed. Drainage ditches, bed nets, and quinine finally gave humans leverage. Until then, the buzz of wings redirected colonization maps and wars. Smuggled silkworm eggs let Byzantium steal China's trade secret. A few hidden eggs shifted the luxury trade toward Constantinople. In the 6th century, silk was basically China's guarded superweapon. Byzantine Emperor Justinian wanted his own supply, not Persian middlemen. Legend says 2 monks smuggled silkworm eggs inside hollow canes. They traveled along Silk Road routes, pretending to be humble missionaries. Once home, they fed mulberry leaves to the tiny larvae. Soon, Constantinople had its own buzzing workshops spinning shimmering thread. The empire no longer begged Persia or China for expensive fabric. Those smuggled worms helped bankroll Byzantine diplomacy, warfare, and church splendor. A cow's infection helped Jenner create the first vaccine. Modern vaccination began with one cow's sore udder in England. In the late 1700s, Edward Jenner noticed hardy milkmaids. They caught cowpox from cows like Blossom, but avoided deadly smallpox. Jenner scraped fluid from cowpox blisters and scratched it into skin. He tested the idea on a boy, James Phipps, with permission. Later, Jenner exposed the boy to smallpox. The child stayed healthy. Word spread through British doctors, then across Europe and the colonies. Governments eventually organized mass vaccinations, often in churches or marketplaces. That single cow's infection quietly rewrote humanity's relationship with epidemic disease. Darwin's Galapagos finches quietly sparked the theory of evolution. A few scruffy island birds helped Charles Darwin question fixed species. In the 1830s, Darwin sailed on HMS Beagle to South America. On the Galapagos Islands, he noticed similar finches with different beaks. Some cracked big seeds, others probed cactus flowers or insects in bark. Locals told him which island each bird originally came from. Back in England, he sorted specimens and saw a bigger pattern. Small environmental differences seemed to push related birds toward different solutions. Those island sketches later fed directly into his book on evolution. Finches from remote volcanic rocks ended up reshaping biology classrooms worldwide. Tiny fruit flies turned a dusty room into genetics' birthplace. Modern genetics took off not in a gleaming lab, but broom closet. Early 1900s, Thomas Hunt Morgan packed fruit flies into a tiny room. At Columbia University, his students bred thousands of Drosophila on bananas. They tracked eye colors, wing shapes, and strange new mutant traits appearing. Morgan realized certain traits traveled together, tied to specific chromosomes. Their hand-drawn charts mapped genes along chromosomes like stations on railways. Those charts turned vague heredity theories into testable, predictable rules. The humble fruit flies never left the room, but genetics exploded worldwide. Today, the same little insects still power labs decoding human disease. Pavlov's hungry dogs accidentally rewired modern psychology and marketing. Our phrase Pavlovian response began with some very confused dogs. In late Imperial Russia, Ivan Pavlov studied digestion, not psychology. He surgically redirected dogs' saliva to tubes, measuring drops during feeding. Then, assistants started ringing a bell every time food appeared. Soon, just the bell made the dogs drool like dinner whistles. Pavlov realized neutral signals could become triggers through repeated pairing. Later, psychologists applied that idea to phobias, ads, and addictions. The dogs never read textbooks, yet their reflexes rewrote whole fields. Every time a phone ping makes you anxious, Pavlov is whispering. Dolly, the cloned sheep, kicked off the genetic engineering age. A single sheep named Dolly made cloning wander from fiction into headlines. In the 1990s, scientists at the Roslin Institute cloned her in Scotland. They used a nucleus from an adult udder cell, not embryo. That nucleus went into an emptied egg, then into a surrogate sheep. When Dolly was born, many worried about human clones marching next. Governments and ethics boards suddenly rushed to write cloning regulation. Meanwhile, labs focused on using similar techniques for medicine and agriculture. Dolly herself lived a fairly normal sheep life, minus constant photographers visiting. Her preserved body in a museum still sparks arguments about scientific boundaries. Laika, the stray Moscow dog, became Earth's first orbital astronaut. Before humans orbited Earth, a stray Moscow dog went first. In 1957, Soviet engineers picked Laika from city streets. They trained her in spinning centrifuges and cramped metal capsules. Sputnik 2 blasted off with Laika sealed inside, no return plan. Official stories first claimed she lived for days, calmly orbiting Earth. Later reports admitted overheating likely killed her within hours of launch. Her flight proved life could survive launch and weightlessness, guiding later missions. The world watched a dog circle overhead, mixing awe and discomfort. Laika's story still shadows every conversation about ethics in spaceflight. A monkey's selfie forced courts to rethink copyright law. A cheeky macaque accidentally triggered one of copyright's strangest lawsuits. On Sulawesi Island, photographer David Slater set up his camera equipment. A wild-crested macaque pressed the shutter, grinning into the lens. Those sharp, hilarious selfies spread online, amusing people everywhere. Animal rights group representatives later argued the monkey owned the copyright. Lawyers pointed out current rules only recognize human authorship for works. After years of filings and settlements, courts never granted the macaque authorship. However, the case pushed judges and lawmakers to clarify digital photo ownership. All because one curious primate liked playing with a stranger's camera. One homing pigeon saved a surrounded battalion in World War I. Hundreds of trapped soldiers owed their lives to a single pigeon. During World War I's Meuse-Argonne offensive, one American unit was surrounded. German troops cut phone lines and shot human runners carrying messages. Officers finally turned to their last homing pigeon, later called Cher Ami. He took off through smoke and bullets, immediately drawing enemy fire. According to reports, he was hit, lost a leg, yet kept flying. The bird still reached headquarters, message tube hanging from torn ligaments. Artillery adjusted fire, and more than 100 men walked out. Stuffed and displayed later, the small pigeon became a symbol of sacrifice. A Polish soldier bear helped capture a Nazi stronghold in Italy. At Monte Cassino, one artillery company's strongest carrier was a bear. Polish soldiers in Iran adopted a Syrian brown cub, naming him Wojtek. He grew up drinking condensed milk, stealing cigarettes, and wrestling soldiers. When the unit shipped to Italy, they officially enlisted him as private. During the brutal Monte Cassino battle, Wojtek reportedly carried heavy ammunition crates. Witnesses remembered a towering bear calmly walking upright with live shells. His image carrying a shell later became the company's official emblem. After the war, Wojtek retired to Edinburgh Zoo, greeting visiting veterans. A handful of soldiers and one bear kept their shared legend alive. Wolves, reintroduced to Yellowstone, literally reshaped rivers and forests. When wolves returned to Yellowstone, the whole landscape quietly rearranged itself. By the 1900s, humans had exterminated wolves from the national park. Without predators, elk lingered in valleys, stripping young willow and aspen. Stream banks eroded, beavers lacked building material, and birds lost cover. In the 1990s, biologists reintroduced gray wolves captured from Canada. Wolves started hunting elk, especially those browsing too long near rivers. Elk herds moved more often, giving young trees a chance again. Willows thickened, beavers rebuilt dams, and streams ran in tighter channels. Predators changed behavior, which changed plants, which eventually even redirected flowing water. Balto and Togo's sled dogs stopped a deadly Alaska epidemic. A relay of sled dogs turned icy trails into emergency lifelines. In 1925, diphtheria threatened children in the remote town Nome. Harsh winter storms grounded planes and blocked ships from delivering antitoxin serum. Mushers and their dogs hauled the medicine by relay across Alaska's interior. Leonard Seppala's lead dog Togo handled the longest, most dangerous leg. Gunnar Kassen's team, led by Balto, carried the final night run. They arrived frostbitten but alive, and doctors quickly injected waiting patients. Newsreels and statues later spotlighted Balto, while Togo quietly faded. Together, both dogs helped turn a likely tragedy into frontier legend. A cow's alleged kick sparked the Great Chicago Fire. For generations, people blamed one cow for Chicago's worst blaze. In 1871, fire started in a barn behind the O'Leary's house. A newspaper later joked that Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern. That playful line hardened into legend, turning one animal into scapegoat. Strong winds spread flames through wooden sidewalks, roofs, and crowded tenements. The fire jumped the river, destroyed downtown, and left thousands homeless. Later investigations admitted nobody really knew the exact ignition cause. Regardless, the image of a clumsy cow stuck in popular memory. Urban fire codes, building materials, and insurance all changed after that night. Napoleon's grand rabbit hunt ended with him fleeing the bunnies. Napoleon Bonaparte once faced a charging horde that absolutely wasn't Prussian cavalry. After a treaty, his staff organized a celebratory rabbit hunt near Paris. Courtiers bought hundreds, maybe thousands of tame rabbits from local dealers. When cages opened, the animals ran toward Napoleon instead of away. Used to hand feeding, they swarmed his boots, coats, and carriage steps. Witnesses described the emperor laughing, then retreating as the tide thickened. Servants grabbed sticks and coachmen whipped reins, trying to escape rabbits. The mighty conqueror finally jumped into his carriage and ordered a retreat. The story survived mostly because nobody could resist retelling it later. Pickles the dog sniffed out the stolen World Cup trophy. Soccer's most coveted trophy was once recovered by a casual neighborhood walk. In 1966, thieves stole the Jules Rimet Cup from a London exhibition. Despite security, it vanished, embarrassing organizers before England hosted the tournament. A few days later, postal worker David Corbett walked his collie Pickles. Pickles sniffed at a newspaper-wrapped bundle hidden under a garden hedge. Inside lay the missing solid silver trophy, still intact and recognizable. Police cleared Corbett of suspicion, and Pickles became an overnight celebrity. He attended banquets, appeared on television, and even received a medal. Meanwhile, England lifted the World Cup with Pickles' unexpected assist behind them. A curious dog led humans to the Lascaux cave paintings. Famous prehistoric cave art came to light because of one dog. In 1940, French teenagers wandered near Lascaux in southwest France. Their dog, often called Robot, chased something into a small hole. The boys widened the opening and climbed down with lamps and ropes. On the walls, they found huge painted bulls, horses, and deer. Colors still glowed despite thousands of years hidden underground. Scholars later dated the artworks to the Paleolithic, long before writing. News spread quickly, turning the quiet hillside into an archaeological sensation. Without that dog's curiosity, those painted herds might have stayed buried. Project Pigeon tried to turn birds into living, guided missiles. During World War II, the U.S. tested a truly bizarre weapon idea. Psychologist B.F. Skinner proposed training pigeons to steer explosive gliders. In his design, pigeons pecked at a target image on a screen. Their pecks adjusted the nose fins, nudging the bomb toward enemy ships. Skinner built prototypes, sliding carriers into training boxes with projected ships. The birds reliably pecked at ships, even when researchers jostled the box. Military officials watched demonstrations, impressed but uncomfortable relying on pigeons for guidance. Ultimately, they canceled the project in favor of electronic guidance systems. Skinner's strange experiment still shows how far wartime creativity sometimes stretches. Hachiko's decade of station waiting became a national legend. In Tokyo, one dog turned a routine commute into a national story. Professor Hidesaburo Ueno's Akita, Hachiko, met him daily at Shibuya Station. One day in the 1920s, the professor died suddenly at work. He never returned, but Hachiko kept coming back to the platform. Year after year, locals saw the dog waiting each evening. Newspapers eventually wrote about him, and donations funded a bronze statue. Even after Hachiko died, people kept leaving flowers at his memorial. The story resonated in a culture that values loyalty and perseverance. Today, tourists still meet under Hachiko's statue, echoing one dog's routine. Rin Tin Tin's stardom helped save Warner Brothers from bankruptcy. Hollywood once leaned on a German shepherd to stay in business. During World War I, American soldier Lee Duncan found a puppy. He brought Rin Tin Tin to the United States after the armistice. In silent films, the dog leaped ravines, understood gestures, and drew audiences. Warner Brothers used his movie's profits to finance other risky pictures. Executives joked that Rin Tin Tin was their studio's best-paid actor. When talkies arrived, his career faded, but the studio had grown. Later generations of dogs with his name appeared in films and shows. Behind the logo and stars, one rescued puppy quietly changed studio history. Seabiscuit's underdog victories lifted American spirits during the Depression. Tiny, knobby-kneed Seabiscuit became a symbol for beaten-down Americans. In the 1930s, the thoroughbred started as an unimpressive, overlooked racehorse. Trainer Tom Smith saw potential, pairing him with jockey Red Pollard. Their unconventional workouts focused on calming him, not simply forcing speed. Newspapers followed Seabiscuit's string of upsets against taller, fancier rivals. A famous match race against War Admiral turned into a coast-to-coast event. Fans gathered around radios, cheering as Seabiscuit surged ahead on the backstretch. For people struggling through unemployment, his comeback wins felt deeply personal. The small horse racing past expectations became a Depression-era folk hero. Secretariat's record-shattering Triple Crown redefined horse racing history. In 1973, one chestnut stallion seemed to break physics on track. Secretariat entered the Triple Crown races with strong times but lingering doubts. At the Kentucky Derby, he ran each quarter mile faster than last. Then, in the Belmont Stakes, he won by an almost absurd margin. Television cameras showed him alone, other horses far behind in dust. His final time set records that still anchor racing discussions decades later. After retiring, he stood at stud, though no offspring matched his dominance. Autopsy later revealed an unusually large heart, fueling endless barroom theories. Secretariat's blazing runs remain go-to footage whenever speed needs visualizing. Smokey Bear's rescue turned one cub into a fire safety icon. Every "Only You Can Prevent Wildfires" poster started with a burned cub. During a forest fire in New Mexico, firefighters found a bear cub. He had climbed a tree, suffered burns, and lost his mother. Rescuers nursed him back to health and named him Smokey. The U.S. Forest Service adopted Smokey as the face of prevention campaigns. Posters, radio spots, and school visits drilled his message into generations. The real bear eventually moved to the National Zoo, receiving fan letters. He even gave him his own zip code for the mail. One frightened cub's survival morphed into one of advertising's longest campaigns. Lonesome George the Tortoise became a global extinction warning. For decades, one Galapagos tortoise carried the weight of an entire subspecies. Scientists found Lonesome George on Pinta Island, apparently the last Pinta tortoise. They moved him to a research center on Santa Cruz for protection. Researchers introduced females from related islands, hoping for hybrid offspring. George developed global fame, appearing in documentaries and conservation campaigns. Visitors lined up to watch him slowly grazing behind protective railings. Despite years of effort, no confirmed eggs or hatchlings ever appeared. When he died in the 2010s, scientists carefully preserved his body. His story turned one quiet reptile into a symbol for vanishing diversity. The Silver Spring monkeys case transformed modern animal rights laws. A dingy behavioral lab in Maryland ended up changing federal research rules. In the 1980s, psychologist Edward Taub studied nerve injury using macaque monkeys. An animal rights activist working undercover photographed cramped cages and untreated wounds. Those images led to police raids on the Silver Spring laboratory. Prosecutors filed cruelty charges, a first for a federally funded research facility. Court battles dragged on for years, with some convictions eventually overturned. Meanwhile, public outrage fueled calls for stronger animal welfare oversight nationwide. Congress and agencies updated inspection standards and record-keeping for research animals. The monkeys themselves disappeared into different facilities, but their case reshaped policy. London's brown dog statue riots shook Edwardian science and politics. A small bronze dog statue once sparked street fights across London. In early 1900s Britain, anti-vivisection activists opposed experiments on live animals. They accused a physiologist of operating repeatedly on the same brown terrier. Supporters placed a monument in Battersea, accusing experimenters of cruelty. Medical students saw the plaque as a slur against their profession. Groups of students marched, tried to topple the statue, and clashed violently. Police repeatedly defended the little dog, turning protests into recurring brawls. Eventually, authorities quietly removed the statue at night to restore order. The episode showed how a single animal monument could expose societal divides. Clever Hans, the supposed math genius horse, exposed experimenter bias. In early 20th century Berlin, crowds flocked to watch a counting horse. His owner claimed Clever Hans could add, subtract, and spell answers. Asked questions, Hans tapped his hoof the right number of times. Skeptical scientists eventually tested him with stricter, blinded procedures. When questioners themselves didn't know the answer, Hans suddenly failed. Researchers realized he watched subtle cues in people's posture and breathing. As they leaned forward or relaxed, he sensed when to stop tapping. The so-called Clever Hans effect warned psychologists about unconscious signaling. Even today, well-designed experiments try to keep participants blind like that. Coco the gorilla's signs changed how we think about animal minds. A gorilla named Coco brought primate intelligence into living rooms worldwide. Starting in the 1970s, psychologist Francine Patterson taught Coco sign language. Coco learned hundreds of signs, naming foods, toys, and familiar people. She combined signs in ways that looked like simple sentences or jokes. Videos showed her gently handling kittens, then apparently mourning when they died. Supporters argued she understood concepts like love, sadness, and responsibility. Critics countered that trainers might unintentionally cue responses, like Clever Hans. Either way, her long life forced people to reconsider strict human-animal boundaries. Decades later, debates about animal language still circle back to Coco. Nim Chimpsky, the signing chimp, challenged human language specialness. If Coco inspired hope, Nim Chimpsky's story brought researchers back down. In the 1970s, psychologist Herbert Terrace raised Nim in New York. Caretakers taught him many signs, logging thousands of recorded interactions. On the surface, Nim strung signs together for requests and comments. Later, Terrace reanalyzed tapes and concluded Nim mostly imitated tutors. He argued the chimp lacked grammar, mainly using signs to demand rewards. Former caregivers disagreed, feeling the study treated Nim like disposable equipment. The resulting controversy raised hard questions about ethics and expectations in research. Together with Coco's case, Nim keeps language debates stubbornly unresolved. A dancing cockatoo helped scientists prove animals feel musical beat. A white cockatoo named Snowball unexpectedly became a YouTube-era science subject. His owner posted videos of him bobbing perfectly to pop songs. Unlike simple tricks, Snowball adjusted his moves when researchers changed tempos. Sometimes he sped up, other times he slowed into exaggerated headbangs. Scientists studying the footage argued he showed true beat synchronization, like humans. That challenged the idea that rhythm sensitivity belonged only to our species. Later tests with other parrots and sea lions found similar rhythmic abilities. Suddenly, questions about music stretched beyond humans into shared neural wiring. All because one bored pet bird liked dancing to catchy tunes. American space chimp Ham took a dangerous suborbital test flight. Before John Glenn orbited Earth, a chimpanzee named Ham rode first. In the early 1960s, NASA needed proof capsules could keep crews alive. They trained Ham at Holloman Air Force Base to pull levers. During his Mercury test flight, a malfunction let too much acceleration build. Telemetry showed his heart racing while he still performed required tasks. The capsule splashed down off-target, briefly sinking before rescue teams arrived. When sailors opened the hatch, Ham reportedly bared his teeth, then relaxed. His successful mission paved the way for Alan Shepard's manned suborbital flight. Ham spent the rest of his life mostly on Earth, in zoos. Félicette, the French street cat, briefly flew into space. France's first space traveler with whiskers was a stray Parisian alley cat. In the 1960s, French researchers selected several cats for rocket experiments. They implanted electrodes to record brain activity during high acceleration and weightlessness. A black and white cat, later nicknamed Félicette, took the suborbital flight. The rocket launched from Algeria, reaching space before the capsule parachuted back. Technicians recovered Félicette alive, monitoring how her body handled the stresses. Soon after, officials ended the cat program and shifted to other species. For decades, her story stayed obscure compared with canine space pioneers. Only recently have memorials and articles finally highlighted Félicette's brief flight. Cane toads unleashed. On crop beetles overran Australia instead. Australia invited one species to dinner and accidentally fed the whole continent. In the 1930s, farmers struggled with beetles eating sugarcane in Queensland. Officials imported cane toads from Hawaii, hoping they'd hunt beetles in fields. The toads mostly stayed near water and farm buildings, ignoring higher stalks. Meanwhile, they'd gobbled native animals and poisoned predators with toxic skin glands. Lacking natural enemies, their population exploded across northern and eastern Australia. People tried fencing, traps, even golf clubs, but containment proved impossible. Ecologists now use the example in textbooks about biological control gone wrong. The original beetle problem faded compared with the unstoppable hopping invasion. Australia's Great Emu War ended with birds outrunning machine guns. Australia once declared war on emus and firmly lost the campaign. Veterans farming in Western Australia struggled as large emu flocks ravaged fields. The government sent soldiers with Lewis guns to reduce bird numbers. Emus proved fast, scattered, and surprisingly good at dodging concentrated fire. Guns jammed, birds scattered, and tall grass made targeting nearly impossible. Newspaper reporters gleefully documented soldiers chasing birds and wasting ammunition. Eventually, officials quietly withdrew the troops, shifting back to bounties instead. The episode became shorthand for badly planned wildlife control programs. In popular memory, the emus strutted off as undefeated feathered victors. Hannibal's war elephants crossing the Alps terrified the Roman Republic. Long before tanks, elephants served as ancient shock troops against infantry. Carthaginian general Hannibal marched from Iberia toward Rome during the Punic Wars. His army included North African war elephants, huge silhouettes against mountain passes. Crossing the Alps, they faced snow, narrow paths, and rock slides. Many animals died en route, but survivors shocked Roman troops in battle. Romans had seen elephants before, yet rarely in such unexpected terrain. The psychological impact sometimes mattered more than the animal's actual combat effectiveness. Hannibal's campaign ultimately failed strategically, but the image remained unforgettable. School books still show elephants clinging to cliff paths above terrified legionaries. Navy dolphins and sea lions quietly changed underwater mine warfare. Not every military specialist carries a rifle. Some carry flippers and whiskers. Since the Cold War, the U.S. Navy has trained dolphins and sea lions. Dolphins use echolocation to spot underwater mines that machines might miss. How disbarkers so divers can later neutralize the explosive devices safely. Sea lions have been trained to tag enemy divers near harbors. Programs operated off Vietnam, in the Persian Gulf, and around American bases. Officials argue the animals can often work better than complex robots. Critics worry about animal welfare and the ethics of battlefield deployment. Either way, marine mammals quietly patrol places most sailors never directly see. Sergeant Reckless. The ammunition horse became a decorated Korean War hero. In Korea's steep hills, a small mare carried more than anyone expected. Marines bought the Mongolian mare from a boy, naming her Reckless. She quickly learned to walk ammunition routes without a handler guiding her. During the Battle of Outpost Vegas, she made repeated trips under fire. Shells exploded around her while she hauled heavy rounds up muddy slopes. On the way back down, she carried wounded men to safety. Marines rewarded her with blankets, extra rations, and a promoted rank. After the war, Reckless moved to the United States to retire. Statues now show her climbing loaded, ears back, in permanent mid-mission.